Well, good morning. This is Frank Neudecker, and it is a blessed morning because we are here and alive and you're able to see this. But I was going to sit here and tell you a story on this good Sunday morning, on this Father's Day, and impart this gift to you if I can. When I was younger, and I mean much younger, I used to train in hand-to-hand combat. And not to brag, I mean, seriously, you can't brag about this kind of thing. The worst I ever finished was second. My instructor was, that's humor. It's humor, you get humor. My instructor would tell me in the early part of the fight that I should, feel out your opponent, you check it out, poke a little bit, probe there, here and there, discover their weaknesses. Then you need to go in and exploit that weakness. Well, politics is kind of the same thing. You search for your opponent's weakness, you exploit that weakness, you work on it. The only difference is that in hand-to-hand combat your time is short, and the end, someone usually dies. In the world of governing in a hostile environment, you attempt the same and the stakes are different. You might not end up dead, and I say that literally, but you can be ineffective. Why? Because most that are ineffective don't see the truth. In Numbers 13:14, there is the most disturbing story, and yes, it is about seeing. Moses is sent 12 spies into the promised land. And they saw pretty much the same thing with their physical eyes. But with their spiritual eyes, they saw something completely different. 10 of them saw land that eats its inhabitants. And those that weren't eaten were of great stature. And those that weren't of great stature were even bigger. They were giants. The 10 men saw themselves as grasshoppers by comparison. Can you imagine that? Can you hear the exaggeration? A land that eats its inhabitants, grasshoppers by comparison. The children of Israel listened to this horrible report, and they began to think about going back into slavery, where Pharaoh hated them as much as the Egyptians had hated them, and they were treated with great cruelty, and they began to pick a new leader who would take them back and negotiate something with Egypt. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? Negotiating away greatness for safety? Well, certainly not all saw the same thing. Joshua and Caleb, what did they see? The minority. Well, they looked at the giants and they saw bread, provisions. They saw fields that were already planted, houses that were already built, barns that were full. They were excited. And they knew if God delighted in them, He would bring them into a land that flows with milk and honey. Of course, this was not without conditions. And what could the Lord have asked of them that would be so horrible that they wouldn't wish to do it? Well, the only condition was not to rebel against the Lord. But apparently that was too much, and they rebelled. So what form was that rebellion? It was simply unbelief. So God let them die in the wilderness, never entering into the promised land that He had for them. You see the comparison. We have so much here, so much opportunity, and we pass it away. We toss it aside as it was nothing Why should God give us the promised land that He has promised us? Good day, good morning, and have a great Father's Day.